Hello, good day. How are you?
Good, thank you. Yourself?
Oh, then we'll leave for the next one.
Just stick over me, okay? Like I'm not even here.
Peter, how are you?
Sir, I'm well. Well done. I'll never forget that, but well done. Probably not. Absolutely, yeah. I'm waiting.
Pringle, I have a problem. I cannot actually watch you. Why? I want you to go downstairs and then you watch me explain to me. Am I going to get arrested if I do the washing over there? Mr. Pringle. Well, you are the chief, you are the chairman of the board. You should answer the question of human rights. Why do I need to go to the main hall to use the washing? The washing, why there's no sign that says you can't order?
I just use it twice.
Doesn't make sense to close the washing in the store. Yeah. There is no sign. There's no sign. There is an office there at $60 an hour saying that you can use the washing. Can you use the washing here? But you are the chairman, you're the big boss. You can tell them what to do. I need to use the washroom. Why do I need to go to the main floor? There's no sign. Why the washroom is closed and it's on the floor?
Never done one.
Yeah, I know. I was going to say, pressure's on, right? It's too late. We already took me a no wire anymore.
Miguel, what's wrong with this one?
You want your officer? Okay.
Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the July meeting of the Toronto Police Services Board. Meeting is properly constituted and called to order. Let me start by asking my colleagues if there are any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflicts of Interest Act. Hearing none, I appreciate that. Thank you. May I have the confirmation of the minutes from the meeting held on June 21st, 2018? Motion to take them as read. Mayor Tory, second to Councillor Hart. All in favor? Contrary? Carried. We have, I think as we start, we welcome Councillor Nunziata back, and we have a swearing-in procedure that we'll go through, but we have some depositions first, 3. So we'll do those first. And the first deputation is by Brenda Ross. And Brenda, I just would remind people, and if you just give me a minute, I just remind everybody of the rules of making a deputation. The board encourages interested members of the community to provide input on issues of importance to them. However, the board wishes to remind everybody of the following rules when making deputations to the board. First, be respectful. Second, don't use offensive words or language. Third, keep your comments focused on the agenda item you're speaking to. Fourth, comments about the conduct of an individual officer or members of the Toronto Police Service or staff are not acceptable, and deputations, except in special circumstances, are limited to 5 minutes. The board believes that the public consultation and input is critical to an effective oversight and will continue to facilitate such input in accordance with the board policies and procedural bylaw. So I think I've read that before, and I think it's important that every now and then we just remind people of those rules that apply to everybody. So the first item, as I said, is the council's, the swearing in of Councillor Nunziata as a new board member, but there are 3 deputations, and the first one is Brenda Ross. So Brenda? So thank you, Brenda. You've got 5 minutes. Okay.
Has been appointed to the board. I would like everyone to know that I'm acquainted with Frances Nunziata. I'm sure she doesn't recognize me, but obviously I know her. I live in District Division 13, Police Division 13, Ward 15, the old city of York. Frances Nunziata is a career politician and a mother. She's very smart, hardworking, dedicated, talented, and she's a very, and always was, a very influential woman. She's an excellent speaker. I've always admired her, and so when our family got into trouble, I went to her for help. And I was told that no help would be forthcoming, and please don't call her again. Now, the point of saying this before she's seated at the board is that I feel that her being seated on the police board is not appropriate. 2 things that I've been given to the board and asked the board to hand out to all the members are 2 items. One is from a veterinarian after people from the city of York started to harass us, making up bizarre stories about our family along with the police. One being that Our black and white cat was a skunk. And my mother's letter in item 5 pertains in part to that story, that we raise skunks. The next item that I've handed out is a letter from a lawyer that we had to hire to deal with the police and the city of York. So bottom line of the story is I'm requesting that Frances Nunziata's nomination to the board be returned and she be exchanged for someone else. Please do not think for 1 minute that I don't recognize Mrs. Nunziata's talents. She's extremely talented, and I am not saying anything to contravene this comment. She's everything I've said she is, and more. I'm simply saying I feel she should not be a member of the board. Thank you.
Okay, Brenda, thank you. Next is Derek Moran.
Shall not be deemed to be in any way my consent expressed or implied, in doing so is fraud. God bless Her Majesty the Queen, and long live Her Majesty the Queen. So, like I said about Councillor Hart, we need to set a good example here, Chair Pringle, for Councillor Nunziata. So you remember how you interrupted me while I was speaking at the last meeting. So what I brought here today, I'll hand this in to, I guess Carlene's not here today. This is from off the Department of Justice's own website. They got something called Charterpedia. This explains what is protected expression under Section 2B of the Constitution, which, take notice, Chair Pringle took an oath to uphold. It's a very long list here. I don't know if it's comprehensive, exhaustive, but 3 of the things that they mark off here, which is protected expression, is hate speech, pornography, and some bizarre, vile, despicable, somehow, some way, I don't know how, what context it is, child pornography. On some level, child pornography is protected expression under Section 2B of the Constitution. Oh, but wait, if you come here to speak to the Toronto Police Services Board, you have to stick exactly to the topic. Oh, and don't criticize anybody. You're going to hurt their feelings. And next month, I will bring the court case that says that we are free to criticize people that work for government, Chair Pringle. So, like, I don't know how many times me and you got to go through this again, but like, if you keep on doing this, like, you know, I'd respectfully ask you to resign as chair of the Police Services Board.
Let's speak to the topic. Yeah, so I don't want to interrupt you, but I'll give you those couple
obviously
seconds back.
you did not even hear a word I said. We are, you know, if you keep on going down this path, I'll demand that you resign as chair of the Police Services Board. Having you as the chair is not in the public interest if you're just not going to get this. Okay, so now, being a member of the police board, congratulations to Councillor Nunziata. Rex versus McMoran, 1948. Court of Appeal of Ontario says, at common law, the term public officer is broadly defined as any person performing public functions and paid out of public funds. So now that she knows that you're all public officers. I got a letter here recently from the Superior Court of Justice, Office of the Chief Justice, dated June 27, 2018. I am responding to your letter of June 11, 2018 to Chief Justice Heather Smith. Judges of the Superior Court of Justice in Ontario swear an oath of allegiance, the wording of which is set out in both Section 4 of the Public Officers Act and Section 2.1 of the Federal Oaths of Allegiance Act. Both statutes are publicly available. Yours truly, Mohan Sharma, Executive Legal Officer. So obviously, Councillor Nunziata is about to sign that oath to the Queen, Section 4 of the Public Officers Act. So this is from the City of Toronto's Audit Committee. On October 27th, 2017, part 1 of 2. Starting at hour 1, minute 48, 17 seconds, Councillor Nunziata says to Tracy Cook, so the solution is to eliminate the court system. This gets a big laugh from out of everyone, notably Tracy Cook and Callie Chapman. Councillor Michael Ford, don't know if he was being serious or not, says, I think the Speaker would be a wonderful judge, so maybe we can move that motion. Then just in case one thought Councillor Nunziata was joking about her comments and the solution being to eliminate the court system, she doubles down on her comments starting at hour 2, minute 13, 56 seconds. You know, there's certain things that the councillors could do our inspectors can't do. we can go to a problem area and we see a garage where there's prostitutes and drugs, and that we can yell at the owner and say, you tear that garage down by tomorrow, or I'm coming back here and you're going to get a huge fine the next day. I go there, the garage is demolished because they're petrified. I know our inspectors can't do that because they have to be nice, but we don't have to be nice. And the court system, get rid of the court system, because that's where our problem is. Government Management Committee, June 13th, 2016, starting at hour 2, minute 11:59 seconds. This was part of the request to find efficiencies, correct? Now I'm talking about the administrative monetary penalty system for the first time. I've brought it to everyone's attention that the Attorney General, Alison Jones, Canadian Press, reported that the Attorney General has decided against it. Jenna Manone even confirmed that. Councillor Nunziata never has this question answered for her on the record, as the guy who answered it has his mic turned off. She then says, yeah, so actually there's a savings of $2.78 million according to the report, which is great. This will also help too, and she's rubbing her forehead about,
20
talking
seconds,
about the
Derek.
report, on the amount of revenue that we're losing on collecting fines. No, hey, wait a second, stop. This guy, Jarek, just spoke for 5 minutes on how we might be violating Section 11D of the Constitution. We might not be following the law. We need to make sure we're doing this properly before we go ahead with this.
Thank you, Derek.
So I don't consent to Councillor Nunziata being a member of this board.
Thank you. Any questions of Derek? Thanks, Derek. Chris Langenfeld?
So before I begin, I'll just raise a point of order of I have a problem with police officers, armed officers standing behind me as I make a deputation at a public meeting of government. I assume the implied threat is if one says something that the government doesn't like, you'll be shot in the back of the head. We've seen that in the world before, and I don't think you need them here to protect the chief. I think he's safe enough, as are the rest of you. Yes, protecting the washrooms as well, Miguel. So, Councillor Nunziata, welcome back. I don't know if you remember. In fact, you were here my first time at the board when I attended, and you were the one kind enough to give me permission to speak to the board, although I wasn't on the agenda to make a deputation that day. And I'd like to point out that that's an issue that's now been changed here by these current leaders of the board, that members of the public are now refused the ability to make a deputation if they haven't provided an advance notice. And I think that's a problem that the last members of the board here made. I hope the current group will change that and reverse some of the problems that we're seeing with the current leadership here. I'd like to point out that in section bylaw number 161 that governs the board's meetings, section 8.6 says the main public agenda of the regular board meetings will be posted on the board website no later than 5 clear business days prior to the board meeting. In fact, the board has never posted a board meeting 5 clear business days, which would be the Wednesday, then the Thursday, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday being the 3 or the 5 clear days that would be required. In fact, this board currently regularly posts it with only 3 days notice and 1 day in advance that people must register. So members of the public, in fact, only have 2 days to review often a 200 to 300 page agenda in order to determine what they're going to say and make their submissions to the board. And that certainly holds with this current board's policy of stifling public input on government. And that's certainly a serious problem. Councillor Nunziata, I know as Speaker of the Council, you've certainly dealt often with issues of governance of Council and making sure that that Council respects the laws and the rights of individuals, and I hope you'll put that into practice here as well. And I hope all the other members will consider that as well and look at reversing some of these ongoing problems that we're having here with this board, including the current policy now where, thanks to the court ruling, we're not required to be searched to come into the building, but in fact you've got pretty much a 1-to-1 ratio of armed officers against members of the public that have the audacity to come and address this government body. And it certainly is terrifying where this group seems to be going. So I suppose that's why, Mayor Tory, I'm running against you for mayor in the upcoming election. So hopefully we'll deal with that. One of the items that I had asked to speak to, and again, this goes to the board's unwillingness to permit people to speak without giving advance notice, is item 5. And I had asked to speak to that, just briefly raising the comment that on item 5 for this complaint of standards, the allegation number 2 was classified as a conduct complaint and assigned to another police service for investigation. It certainly
Chris,
seems reasonable that this board would withhold
Langenfeld,
making a judgment until they have the response from an independent party that's looking at this matter. So since I can't speak a full 5 minutes on that item, I hope the board and Councillor Nunziata, that you as a new member and with a history of dealing with issues like that, will take that into consideration. Thank you.
Colleagues, any questions for Chris? Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Nunziata, if you come forward, we can do the swearing in. If you read both the oath of office and oath of secrecy.
I solemnly swear that I will be loyal to Her Majesty the Queen of Canada, and that I will uphold the Constitution of Canada, and that I will, do the best of my ability, discharge my duties as a member of the Toronto Police Services Board faithfully, impartially, and according to the Police Services Act, any other act, and any regulation, rule, or by law, so help me God. I solemnly swear that I will not disclose any information obtained by me in the course of my duties as a member of the Toronto Police Services Board, except as I may be authorized or required by law, so help me God.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Do I have to sign? Oh, I have already signed.
Yeah, oh, yes, we do. Here,
Don't
right here.
don't I get a pin?
Yeah, we will do that later. Here you are. Right there. Thanks, Francis. Here. Welcome back, Francis. Colleagues, before we go through the regular agenda items, obviously it's been concerning to everybody, the level of gun violence in the city, and there's been lots of discussion, and the police have worked very hard at it. Mayor, you've been very much involved, as of other levels of government, but I wonder, Chief Saunders, if you might start by just giving us an overview of the city and your plans in policing it.
Thank you, Chair. So in consultation and working with our city hall, as well as some of the agencies throughout the city, including TCHC, last week we sat together and spoke about how we could properly align as entities in order to enhance or have the proper synergy to reduce the gun violence that's occurring in the city. I can tell you that late May, early June, the Toronto Police Service started to move towards a strategic plan that was dedicated strictly to reduction of gun violence across the city. Since then, the city, through the mayor and the councillors, have worked and aligned with us as we now have an opportunity of utilizing more resources to allow us to have a strong intelligence-led direction in policing to look at and use whatever efforts from a frontline and from a specialized officer perspective to reduce and be strict on the gun violence and those individuals who use guns in our city to reduce and eliminate that from happening. We play a role in this whole thing. What I like is the fact that many other entities are on board working with us. From the proactive piece, the Toronto Police will be looking at the enforcement piece when necessary, and the third piece to everything also involves what happens when people are in fact brought before the judicial system, and are the systems all working fairly aligned together? Are the proper resources provided to all three entities and not just one? Our focus is not to disrupt neighborhoods, but to have positive contacts when needed, but also to have an understanding of what the criminal elements are within those communities and be specific in addressing those particular needs. We're looking at 8 weeks. It's fluid in nature, so it's not a rigid script. Because it's intelligence-led, it has fluidity to it. So based on what the pressures and issues are in that real time, our responses will be dealt with appropriately, and understanding the sensitivity of enhancing our relationships with our community partners as well as our communities that we're serving.
Thank you, Chief Saunders. Colleagues, questions of the Chief? Any comments? Okay. Thank you. Mayor Tory, do you want to? Thank you very much. We're permitted to ask the Chief for his comments. We have your item under number 16.
Mr. Chair, if this item is going to be dealt with now, I would also put my motion at this time, and
Okay.
I've circulated a letter. I think, as you know, I'll just start by saying I have circulated a letter, which I think has been made public as well, to board members, and this is in response to a meeting that was held at City Hall last week involving senior police officials, I think including the chief, as well as senior city officials and others, designed to sort of see if we could find some things we could undertake besides the investments announced in the community by myself for City Council approval, and besides the initiative undertaken by the chief, both in terms of the planning he's been doing for months on this, but also in terms of the temporary allocation of resources to provide for more overtime. In this case, the chief also asked specifically at that meeting as to the support he might receive from the city, ultimately as the sort of funder of the police service, for two measures that would have to be approved by this board, and then in turn the funding would have to be approved by the City Council. Those two measures being the addition of some cameras to increase in public spaces, as I said at lunchtime today, sensitively and prudently deployed in public spaces to help the police in crime prevention, crime investigation, crime suppression, and secondly, the use of the ShotSpotter technology, which is in use now in about 90 other cities, which, without getting too complicated, because I'm not sure I could very competently describe how the technology works, but it uses microphones to triangulate sounds and give a very precise picture of where a gunshot is coming from, and then convey that information in real time to the police, so that as opposed to some instances where nobody ever phones the police about a gunshot, or other instances where they phone 911 and then the police are sent out, but the people may well be long gone. This gives real-time information to police, including on mobile devices. And so these are tools that the chief and others have indicated that will help them to do their job in the fight against gun violence and the fight against crime generally. And so what I've said in these motions, which maybe we can put up just so people can see, is that we would, as a board, so as to sort of formalize, as it were, the request for funding from the city, at least initially, although I hope ultimately a lot of these expenditures will be financed by the federal and provincial programs that have been made available to fight gang violence and to prevent crime. But we would approve the increase in the number of CCTV cameras by 40 to be deployed largely in public spaces. Secondly, to approve the acquisition and implementation of the ShotSpotter technology in places to be determined by the Chief of Police. Thirdly, to forward formally to the request to the City Council a request for our final meeting before the election hiatus to allocate the funding for these two projects, which would over 2 years total $4 million. So in other words, for 2018 and 2019, the total cost would be at the highest $4 million. It might in fact be less to deploy these two things. you would only deploy that money on behalf of the city if we did not receive it from the other governments. And then there's just furthermore contained in this motion a request that the chief report to the September meeting of this board on how you could expand the neighborhood officers program in the event that some monies are made available for that purpose, which we expect could be the case. And that's not to the exclusion of other frontline officer or other kinds of resource increases, but it's just if this was something that was a focus, we would have at least a plan ready to take advantage of that. And then finally, the fifth part of the motion just says that we will continue to engage with the other two orders of government, federal and provincial, to explore additional mechanisms for financial and other support for the police service's efforts to combat gun violence. And I just should say, by way of in conclusion, first of all, the chief has been an excellent sort of partner, because this is a three-pronged approach: justice system, advocacy on bail and gun laws, increased deployment or better deployment of police resources across the city, and investments in the community and people and families and kids. And he's been a steadfast supporter of number three, understanding that is as important as the deployment of some kinds of other resources, and it's been very helpful to me. And I want to say that as well, the other governments, I met with the Prime Minister on this very subject last Friday. I've had discussions with the Minister of Community Safety, the previous one, Ralph Goodale. I think he still is, but there's now another minister, former Chief Blair, involved in that. And I've had meetings as well, a meeting with Premier Ford, where this was specifically discussed, and all of those governments are very anxious to help Toronto, help the Toronto Police Service, help the board in our efforts to combat gun violence. And so that is why I'm confident that these projects will be financed in whole or in part by them, because they've indicated there are very substantial sums of money available on a national basis, and that Toronto's needs, given some of the challenges we faced, are at the forefront of their attention. So I would move these motions so as to allow us to respond to the chief's requests and to forward to the City Council the request for the funding, if it's needed, to finance these acquisitions and implementation, hoping that it can be covered by these federal and provincial programs.
Thank you, Mayor Tory. I also thank you for convening. No, thank you. Give us a few minutes, Chris, please.
This is a matter that has not been previously disclosed to the public.
Chris, thank you very much. We'll get to you shortly. First of all, Mayor Tory, thank you for that, and thank you for convening the meeting at City Hall, and Chief Saunders, your requests to get the support you need to make sure that the city is as safe as we wish it to be. First of all, are there any questions of Mayor Tory? Second of all, Chris is right. We will hear, because this is a walk-on item, which is allowed under the rules. It's in response to a question by me, and we will hear, if anybody wishes to make a deposition, the same rules applying. But first of all, colleagues, any questions of the mayor before we get on to that? Okay, then we will take depositions. Chris Langenfeld, you had your hand up. You know the rules, and we'll give you 5 minutes. Okay, please just come over and speak to the secretary. Yeah, in Brenda's case, you're fine. Thank you. Chris, go ahead.
To speak and address the board members on this matter. I have a serious problem with a last-minute $4 million plea to implement procedures that I'm not sure what this shot spotter is. From the sounds of it, you're going to be putting microphones to record the conversations of anybody in the public, and I realize, Mayor Tory, that you're shaking your head. No, 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 we would never do that. But believe it or not, somebody else is going to come into office after you. There will be a subsequent chief of police, there will be a subsequent mayor, there will be subsequent members of council and the board, and not all of them are going to be reasonable people. So smart people think ahead and think of the potential for a downside, and they make sure that things aren't put in place that could endanger our freedoms and democracies here. And we expect you to not put in things like this. Last September, while you were holding people and denying them access to this board, you snuck in an approval for $1.8 million for the chief to put in facial recognition software. Presumably for all these cameras that you've got out in public spaces, you can now download and record who's walking where, and you can tell who's dropping somebody off to a police board meeting, and you can have a good solid dossier on the background of people. The Nazis did a good job of it. The Soviets did a good job of it. You're certainly setting up the foundations for a similar kind of program, and it's mighty frustrating, sir. The idea that you're going to have this without the public having had an opportunity to review what it is you're talking about, and you're going to bring this on as a last-minute thing and say, you know what, let's throw another $4 million of taxpayers' money to the service. Now, obviously, something needs to be done with policing in this city, and perhaps if you didn't have dozens of officers standing around here threatening the people that dare to come and speak to their government, and if these people were out there doing their jobs, fighting against the people with the guns, maybe we wouldn't have the deaths that are happening in this city. But it's your incompetence, and I agree with that officer that said so. I disagree with most of what he said, and if you were competent, then you'd be out there explaining to your officers what the advantage of these programs that have been put in place are.
Mr. Langfeld, please keep it respectful.
I would say most people here will agree that is respectful, sir. The fact that you don't believe that the guy that you're the campaign manager for is getting slammed is unsurprising, and I'm assuming that's why you're in this role, sir. Now, Chief, I certainly agree with some of the ideas that you're putting into place. I don't agree with the implementation in a lot of cases, and there's certainly a number of issues here. But I think it comes down to proper management at all levels to address the officers' concerns and explain to them how this is going to make it better, not the idea that we're going to threaten any officer that dares to speak out. That's not what you're here to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Langfeld. Any questions of Chris? Just a point of interest. I have no involvement with Mayor Tory's campaign. I have in the past. I have zero involvement now. So just to correct your information. Second of all, perhaps Chief Saunders, you might just explain ShotSpotter briefly, the technology to the public.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Chair.
I would also say I was appointed by Mr. Ford, not the current mayor.
I realize that, yes, sir. Actually, council under Mr. Ford, but yes, sir.
The guiding principles are the same with any equipment that is issued to the Toronto Police Service. It's not the equipment that is important, it's how it is used. It is following all of the procedures and law that is necessary first and foremost. So that is something that is critical. It is tested by law. It is tested in consultation as well. ShotSpotter is technology that detects the sound of gunshots, period. That's it. I have yet to, and I don't know what you searched on the internet, whether or not it's used for voice detection, but that certainly is not what it is designed for. It can delineate between the backfire, fireworks, etc., and it provides us an opportunity when shots are fired to respond to the exact location quicker than the conventional systems which we have now. If you check the data on the internet, you will see that it shows the success behind that technology. And as each day passes, there are new technologies that are out there, and I will suggest, so that it doesn't become a continuous conversation, any technology that we are going to utilize will be tested, will be scrutinized, we'll have the proper procedures in place, will be transparent so that the public has an understanding of why we're using it and under what rules and guidelines for any equipment that we have issued to the service.
Thank you, Chief Saunders. I'd also say that Mayor Tory spoke, I thought, very well to it. It's in 90 cities. Listen, we've seen over a number of years up and down spikes in gun violence. It's something that always concerns us a great deal. I think from my own view, in a difficult summer, the police have done a very good job identifying, acting quickly. But we also want as a board to make sure that they have the right tools available to make sure that our city is and continues to be a really safe place. This is one of them, as you said, identified by the chief in a meeting convened by council at City Council with the mayor, getting experts together, and here's a request. The city is acting, and the mayor is acting very quickly to say, this makes sense. We want to make sure you've got the tools available, recognizing the challenges that are always faced here. So thank you very much for your input. We appreciate it. Sorry it's a walk-on item, but it was not on the agenda. I wanted to make sure, given the public importance of it, that I asked the question, we got fully briefed. So thank you, Chris.
Well, and if I may just briefly respond, I'll just point out, I had, and I'm sure most of the people here, had never heard the term shot spotter before. Obviously, nobody, because this document was only handed out minutes ago, nobody had the opportunity to do any kind of research. I might have some response to that, but I've never heard of it before, and I would need the time. So I hope that instead this matter will come up on the next agenda so that people can actually prepare and speak to this intelligently.
We can hear depositions at the next agenda, yes.
Thank you.
Brenda, you wanted to?
May I just
sorry,
say,
no.
Mr. Chair,
Yep.
I have no objection whatsoever, and so Mr. Langenfeld and others understand. The urgency in bringing it now was so that the request could be put in front of the City Council, which has its final meeting next week. So if it is to be funded, then that decision has to be taken next week. And so if at a future meeting anybody wants to put this on the agenda to have a more full discussion of the technology and its merits and demerits, that's fine with me, but it was brought here now because there's an urgency to get the funding approved if we're going to implement that and or the cameras, and the City Council's last meeting to fund anything like this would be at that time.
Thanks. That's a great point. Ken, did you have something you want to raise?
So, Matori, is this a decision that's going to be made by by City Council of the approval?
My understanding as to the way this works is that we, in response to, here's how it worked. There was this meeting held between police officials and city officials with the express purpose, and it was arising out of a motion made by 2 city councillors to have an urgent meeting to discuss gun violence and what could be done to combat it. At that meeting, there were many things discussed, some of which have been responded to, community investments and some increased police deployment and so on. But also, these 2 technologies were mentioned by the chief and other senior police officials as something that would be helpful to them in the context of fighting gun violence. So in order to have the request conveyed to the City Council to fund something that will in technical terms be the expenditure of the police board and the police service, there has to be the budgeting done for it by the city. So this board, if it passes my motion, will request the city, will approve the acquisition of those 2 technologies, and will ask the city to fund it. The city putting the money forward to fund it with the expectation that hopefully the federal and provincial programs will actually cover all or part of that money. But that's the way the chain works. It has to come here, say, yes, we want it, we want to implement it, to the city, would you please fund it? The city will make its own decision next week to hopefully to fund it, and then it could be implemented by the police service. But it's just for the way the budgeting process works. And as I mentioned, there's an urgency to it because the last meeting of City Council until January of 2019 happens next week.
So then this is an operational issue, more or less, is it? With the chief making a decision around the effectiveness of this particular?
I would like to be very clear that I wouldn't be coming forward with any motion to get the board to approve this or any other technology or to have the funding unless it had come from the chief. This came from the police service and senior police officials at their initiative at a meeting called by the city to discuss what we could do to combat gun violence. And these were 2 pieces of technology the police service identified that they could use. I support it strongly. The police chief has certainly convinced me these 2 things can be useful. I've done some reading on it myself, both of these things. And so I'm asking the board to approve it and then the city council to agree to fund it if the municipal funding is necessary. In other words, if the other 2 governments don't fund it under their programs.
Okay, we've got 3 more deputations, and then we'll have a chance for further discussion. The next deputation, Brenda. Officer, would you be kind enough to help Ms. Ross? Thank you.
convinced that this new technology is what I want to see in Toronto, and I have no time to look into it. I have no one to ask, no people to call. I mean, you just brought it up because there was an emergency. We have all these problems with everyone getting shot. But I have a question. My item is coming up next, but when I reported a gang in my neighborhood over and over and over again, I was ignored, and I was left to fight the gang. So I'm not really convinced it's about technology. We disbanded Tavis, I have no idea why, and we set in motion a string of problems. Good police officers have come forward to say what they have to say about what is unraveling in our city, and now they're under investigation, and they're scared to talk. And I'm scared that they're scared. I am frightened when good police officers are in trouble for speaking up, because a couple of officers came to me in the past and said, sorry, we can't help you. We're afraid to come forward. We're sorry for you. We want you to know how sorry. Blah, blah. I'm not interested in that conversation. The police should not be scared to come forward and say their mind, and they have. And I want to know why the chief of police has under investigation a good policeman who tried to write to you, the mayor, and give his concerns. I'm very disturbed by that.
Brenda,
now,
please stick to the technology issue. Thank you.
This technology. It's not about people. It's about technology. And it's a last-minute walk-on item that none of us have been able to look into. I have no idea how I feel about it. The sound of it off the top of my head, I'm going to say, I don't like it. I'm not into a whole pile of technology. I'm into people taking care of our problems, not into cameras and audio recordings and this recordings. So I have grave concerns. This is our money that you're spending, and I don't know if it's a wise way of spending it. I think what might be wiser and cheaper and for free is to pay attention to what the police have told us. This is what they think. They're the ones that have to do it. I'm not a policewoman. They're the ones who have to go out and do it. And I'm going to tell you, when I had to face down all of these people from the gang, led by a school teacher, do you know how frightening it is when someone points a gun at you and you don't know if it's real or not? I'm going to tell you, it scares the hell out of you when somebody is pointing what looks like a real gun at your kid, at your mother, and at you. That's what's scary. I'm not scared of the good policemen. I'm scared of the rotten ones. I'm for the policeman who told you that he's got something to say. Let him talk and stop investigating him.
Thank you, Brenda.
Thank you.
Next deputy is Ruben Charlie. Thank you. You get 5 minutes. I'll give you a 1 minute warning.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Had
you.
to leave work thanks to this little sneaky item. Thank you so much for that. I'm really concerned about the technology that's proposed here. I'm concerned about the fact that the Toronto Police Service has a documented problem with anti-Black racism and the targeting of Black communities with this type of technology. It really concerns me that the mayor and the city councillors who are on this panel, who are supposed to be representing this city, are doing nothing to curb the increased police powers. In fact, you're just giving them right over. The fact that you are allowing the police budget to be determined entirely by the police chief with his obviously own agenda, you know, is very concerning, considering you're supposed to be a regulating body. And as for the neighborhood officers program, I mean, we've seen this already with the school resource officer program. We saw that there are documented, reported cases of students, Black, brown, undocumented youth who actually suffer from these programs. We've already seen it. And yeah, I'm sure there are like a couple good police officers out there, I have no doubt, who do really good work in these communities. But we know that the youth that are most impacted are the ones with mental health issues, the ones who are Black, the ones who are brown. And right now, the fact that not only have members of this board, I know I'm not allowed to speak to individual members, have used very damaging and dehumanizing language towards the communities that these services are supposedly supposed to help. or do something for, I'm not quite sure what it is very concerning in terms of what the actual outcome for these groups will be. I don't see a similar increase in actually consulting with these communities about what they want. I don't see an investment in programs that are actually designed and developed by the people that live in these communities. And, you know, also these cameras and this technology, there's nothing in here about oversight. There's nothing in here in terms of how these are going to be located, how they're going to be used, how they're going to be accessed. So I would love to know more information about that as well. But yeah, I think that this is a really dangerous and a really concerning approach to this issue, and one that has not been proven to work in the past. So I would love to hear more about how that's going to happen before this is passed in any way.
Okay, thank you for your input. Colleagues, any questions? If not, thank you. Rosemary Frey, please. Rosemary, you know the rules, 5 minutes, 1 minute warning.
Hello, I just, this is a bit extemporaneous, but I certainly would echo the concerns that are quite obvious that, well, let's just plunk down new technology without, and you said, well, we can look on the internet for information. Well, that information should be presented here to us, to the public. And if you were speaking, Chief, to councillors last week about this, well, why wasn't it put on the agenda in advance? All of a sudden, I mean, this is not something that just came up today. So it's really a disservice to the public, and I hope you realize that. And also, Chief Saunders, you said that all new technology and equipment is tested and basically proven to be useful before it's used. Well, if that were the case, then what about tasers? What about, I was at the session, and so was Chair Pringle and others, and many people, academics and others came up and said, here's the evidence that tasers cause more harm, cause more deaths and injuries to civilians. When police are given them, it causes more harm. And there's clear evidence. Dr. Leslie Wood presented that, other people did. And poof, at the end of the session, you said, Chair Pringle, you said, well, we're going to take everything into account that's been shown today, discussed. And in a minute later, you said, we're going to make sure that all the recommendations from the local inquest are implemented. And that includes every police officer, frontline officer getting a taser. So one time you're saying, oh, we're going to take this evidence into account, and that includes evidence that shows that these weapons are a problem, and then poof, we're going to use them anyway. So this is a farce. We all know this is a farce. This is a complete, and this item shows how much of a farce there is. It's just, we're going to do this. We have the power. We're going to do it. We don't care what the evidence is. We don't care whether there is harm or ill done to the public or good. We're going to do it because we have the power to do so. And that doesn't exactly help. You know, most of us are extremely law-abiding, good residents. We care about this city. That's why we're here. We could be doing a million other things with our time, with our lives. We have to confront power and injustice where it hurts, where it's, and this is serious power and serious injustice. And we have to speak out because you guys aren't doing your jobs. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosemary. Any questions, Rosemary? Finally, Miguel.
I'm going to direct my comments to Chief Saunders. You mentioned that when I came in that your office were not going to deal with the problem about the washrooms on the second floor. Here's what they say.
They've been given direction right across the board. It's only stuff that the public have to use the public washrooms.
Yeah, the public washrooms. Put it downstairs, right?
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks, Superintendent. So, if you want, I will take you downstairs and show you where it is.
I know what it is, but we always normally use the washroom.
I always.
Yeah, Miguel, thank you. You've made your point. Stick to the Miguel, please stick to the.
Give me the memo of why they're closing today.
Miguel, thank you. Would you turn it off? We got it.
Okay.
Now, stick to the item, please.
I've been coming here for 10 long years to this board. 10, Mr. Chairman Pringle. I know everybody in this table. I don't create any problems. I have diabetes and I want to use the washroom. Why do I need to go downstairs? When for the last 10 years, this washroom has always been available to the public.
Miguel, that is not on this
Please
item.
explain. I want some explanation.
Get on with the item,
sounds like a
or we'll
bullshit.
thank you very much.
Sounds like bullshit, Mr. Saunders.
Okay, thank you. Colleagues, we've had a number of depositions. I think this is new technology. Mr. Mayor, you have made a very good point that, I mean, we have an issue that is of real concern to all citizens about the gun violence and the spike in gun violence. You correctly convened a meeting at the city, and the chief has made some recommendations. Your council is about to end, so I get that you're acting on it very quickly. I think, given the concerns we're hearing, we may well want at the next meeting for Chief Saunders, you to give us a full update on the technology and how it works. But at the moment, we have a need right now to get on with this as the recommendation. So, colleagues, I throw it open to you. We've heard the deputations. We've heard the mayor speak on it. We heard the chief speak on it. Francis, you had your hand up first.
Hello?
Nothing's changed. It still
Thank
works
you.
the same way.
Mr. Chairman, first of all, I would like to move a motion to add the item on the agenda that wasn't done, so I'll move that. Okay.
Okay, so moved. It is a walk-on item, so it's number 16. Motion to put it on the agenda, seconded by Councillor Hart. All in favor? Any contrary? Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So, Mr. Chairman, I do support the mayor's letter and the recommendation. And just to clarify on some of the deputants on their comments, the reason it's on the agenda today and the reason for urgency is that at the last council meeting, there was a motion, a member's motion that was presented that we voted on at council. And there were certain directions and recommendations from that motion. And following that motion, there were I believe that there were some meetings that were being held with the chief and with Toronto Housing, a number of people. And at next week's council meeting as well, there's also two other items that are coming forward as far as gun violence. So this motion and the recommendation that the mayor has before us for the board to approve and then bring to a city council is in response to the motion that we moved last month at council. And it was very clear in that motion that we come back with action, with a recommendation at the next council meeting. And as you know, next week's council is our last council meeting before the election. And that's why the urgency to get council to support the recommendations. We have to do it now and have the board approve it and bring it forward to council. So that's the reason for that. And so as far as the recommendations, I know that I can speak on behalf of my residents in my ward where we have a lot of gun violence, is that they are looking for action and they do support the cameras. And as a matter of fact, they have asked me over and over again that why can't we have cameras on the main street? Even if the businesses have to pay for it, the BIA, they want these cameras because they do feel a lot safer if they know cameras are on the main street and in the residential areas. And I think we need to do something. We need to take action. There's a lot of violence, gun violence out, and we just can't sit back and wait until a few months until people have had the opportunity to check out the the proposal and the works or not work. I think that we need to do what it takes and what money it takes because we're all fed up with the gun violence. And I think that it's enough playing political games. We need to get this done. And I support this motion 100%. And I think there's going to be other recommendations coming forward at council next week with other members of council that want to go even a little further on taking action on their motions and working with the chief. And I want to thank the chief. I know that you're working with the various divisions and there's action in the community. I know I can speak on behalf of my community, and thank you to the mayor for bringing this forward. It's important that we vote on this motion unanimously. We just can't sit back and wait. We have problems on the streets that we need to take action.
Thank you, colleagues. Any other comments? Ken?
Thanks. I do agree that, this immediate attention needs to be on the whole question of violence. However, my concerns around this are based on the fact that the technology, which I'm sure the chief has recommended this, that it would be maybe effective, but in view of the fact that we have committed ourselves to engage communities in understanding, all the things that impact on their community, and then we're hearing that there's a lot of ignorance around, or not a misunderstanding or not understanding this technology. So there's a bit of a contradiction in my view in terms of, especially with our modernization and the emphasis on community engagement, right? In understanding, helping people to understand the environment, what's going to be there, what's the impact is going to be. Because in the past, there have been measures taken that were not necessarily in the interest of the community. And the community does have a right to understand and give their input, right? And I think that is something we need to consider.
Yep, agreed. Colleagues, any other comments? Mayor Tory, and then I've got one.
Okay, Mr. Chair, we'll simply say this. Most of this comes, and I should point out that I've gone to great lengths to point out that the response to a huge community concern about gun violence, which comes from all segments of the community, every person of every description, every neighborhood, and the most acute concern, of course, is coming from the neighborhoods where these acts of violence are taking place or proximate to those neighborhoods. And I've been out in those neighborhoods, not just in the past couple of weeks or the past couple of months, but for the past several years. But I certainly have been out most intensively, and I've been out with the police. And they're asking for precisely what they are being given, to the extent we could pull things together in a time when we faced an immediate challenge. And that is, first of all, some advocacy that our police community and the citizens feel about the justice system and about the continued availability of guns, and about the continued availability, for example, of bail for repeat gun offenders who are, the police told me this when I rode through 14 Division last week. They were telling me that on bicycles with them, as a sort of a bicycle ride along, that they're arresting people, and hours later, the very same people they just went to the trouble of arresting are ending up...
Would you please stop interrupting, or we will disown the meeting?
So that's what they said, and I guess and a lot of people have told me the same thing. But so there's advocacy on the justice system. Secondly, there's the matter of police resources, which falls into really two categories: human resources, and the police chief addressed that last week in the context of some of the additional monies that the city will put up through the police service or otherwise to deploy more police officers in the hours and places they're needed most. And then there's technology and capital, which consists of these two examples of technology, for example, which I, as the sponsor of this here, am quite happy should be discussed in terms of educating everybody more about what they are. But as I've tried to make clear, we needed to have the approval today, and it doesn't mean it'll be bought or installed, but it does mean the City Council approval to fund this will be given next week. Otherwise, we'd be put in a position where we couldn't implement this. And then finally, I want to make the point that the biggest single investment we are making directly in response to the community, when you talk about community engagement, and I've had all kinds of groups into my office, and I've been out to visit all kinds of groups, even in the last few weeks, let alone the last few months or years, was about investment in the community. And by far, the biggest allocation that we're making is to expand and enhance existing community programs that the community told us were working. I personally was involved in calling out to the different parts of the community and saying which programs are working the best, which could be expanded immediately, like this summer. So we're going to create jobs and other kinds of opportunities for kids this summer, because we're expanding these programs, and that I hope will help not only to help those kids on a positive path to self-respect and to achievement and whatnot, but also to make sure that we keep as many people as possible, as far away as possible from gang activity and other kinds of things like that. And so this is a balanced program. We've had the full and complete input and support of the chief, and I thank him for that, because the meeting was called by City Council direction to ask what might be done, and it was not just asked of the police chief, it was asked of community groups and public servants and others as to what we could do in the short and medium term, and that is what this program is directly responsive to, the whole program. Police resources, justice system advocacy, and community investment. And we're making a huge additional investment, and it's still not enough. We will do more, but it is a huge investment supported by the other two governments to make sure we do what the people ultimately want us to do. They want us to do everything we can in the short and medium term to combat this gun violence and to make sure this city stays safe. And that's exactly what all of this is meant to do, including these initiatives today.
Yeah, so question to the chief, that the implementation of this plan would have, you saying, immediate impact on the reduction of violence. Is that?
I don't want to get into this vortex. I've been very clear that the plan has a lot of moving parts. And if we isolate it to the enforcement piece, then we have failed. Looking at everything from all angles is what's necessary to get this right. I can tell you that our role when it comes to the enforcement piece is robust. It will have the proper elements to navigate through the communities with the least amount of disruption. That's not what our intent is. But please understand the entire script and not to frame it into that same direction that has been repetitive. And I think that the direction we're moving in now is a positive one. And I'm looking forward to having the other partners join us in the ownership piece in keeping the community safe collectively.
Thank you, Chief. Obviously, these are complex issues, and there are always another side to it. But I think that, Mayor Tory, you've brought together, and the council's brought together the appropriate people. There is a significant concern right across the city in all neighborhoods about the issue. All levels of government are concerned and have put up their hand appropriately. I think it's important that we continue to monitor and at the appropriate time ask for a report on ShotSpotter. But I think that we make a compelling case that while the men and women, and I just emphasize this again, Chief Saunders, I think are doing a first-class job at the Toronto Police. These are complex issues across the city, and your job is to continue to do the outstanding job that the men and women are doing, and we want to make sure that you've got the resources available to do that. So I think it's appropriate. I know there's always competing points of view, but this board has got to decide what we think is the appropriate thing, the most appropriate thing to deal with the challenges at the time. So if there are no other comments or questions, I guess we need a motion on, and Mary, you're putting it forward on your letter and adopting that. Councillor Nunziata, you've already spoken. Are you seconding? Yeah. Yes, certainly. Go ahead.
Thank you. It was very helpful, the clarification around this motion is specifically around allocating a budget at City Council next week. So perhaps before this is implemented or purchased, as you said, Chair, that we do come back with a presentation to this board and the public, and also perhaps we can have the discussion then about confirming what policies we do have in place for oversight of cameras and security and things like that, because I know we do have those in place. So perhaps we can select a date for when that can be presented back to us and discussed.
So do you want to make a motion to that effect, or do you? Because I think it's something that would we can do it that way if you want to ask the chief to come back at a specific time, or we can merely ask him to, at the appropriate time, come in and update us. Because obviously, well, we need to get the budget appropriated now. It takes some time to implement.
I'm quite happy to accept as a friendly amendment that we ask for some sort of presentation at, let's say, the September meeting, because we're asking for the plan on the neighborhood officers at that time. And that include on the technology, but also on oversight of the technology and what present procedures exist, because I'm sure that's fairly easy to present what's already in place, and that we would just include that in the motion for the September meeting. I'm just suggesting.
Chief Saunders, is September something that is achievable from your point of view?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Any other comments, colleagues? Francis? Ryan, have you captured that?
Like the second floor washings are closed? Why? Is that a budget issue, Mr. Saunders? All of a sudden they close the washroom for the public. I want to go to the washroom, but I can go. I can go downstairs. I have diabetes. I had to go 3 times to the washroom because I had diabetes.
Just get it up there. Just put it up. Hey, could we have quiet, please? We'll get the resolutions up and get on with this. We have
On a point of clarification.
Yes, go ahead, Ken. So here's the amendment to it, to request the chief to report to the board at September 2018 meeting concerning what oversight will be applied to the implementation of Shop Spotter.
Just to help our executive director, Mr. Chair, it doesn't quite capture the essence of what we talked about, which is both a presentation on the technology itself and the oversight of these kinds of technologies. In other words, because it includes cameras when it comes to the oversight, because I think we may be unaware of exactly what and the public of what oversights exist today to protect against improper use, as it were, of the cameras. So.
Okay, Mayor Tory, does that capture? Colleagues, you're comfortable with that in regard? So we have a motion to, is it 2 separate motions or one motion to adopt the? So the amendment, so a motion to adopt the amendment number 1. Mayor Tory, seconded to Councillor Nunziata. All in favor? Any contrary? And then a motion to adopt item number 16, the mayor's letter. And Mayor Tory, Councillor Nunziata, all in favor? Any contrary? Thank you very much. Carried. That takes us to. Thank you very much. Item number 5 is the review of the complaint investigation pertaining to service provided by Toronto Police Service Professional Standards case PRS 068430. It's Brenda Ross. We have a deputation first. Sandy, we have a deputation. So Brenda. Brenda, I would just point out that, we have extremely sympathetic to the issues you're bringing up. It's something that we have discussed for some time. We have especially provided you with some assistance in getting there. You've provided us with a bunch of documentation, including some documentation most recently, which was passed around to everybody. You know the guidelines. We're giving 10 minutes, is it, to the discussion here, Brenda. But again, you know, you've heard my cautions, and even in an issue like this, you have to. I feel that you're trying to intimidate me, Chairman I'm not Pringle. Trying to intimidate you. I'm just trying to lay out the ground rules so that you understand. So you have 10 minutes in this occasion. So please go ahead, and then we'll have questions afterwards. Thank you.
I don't need anyone's sympathy. My family doesn't want your sympathy. What we want is justice. I realize I'm fighting a group of people that don't know the meaning of the word justice, but that is what we want. Excuse me. My baby is dead. My mother is dead. My daughter is not okay. I'm not okay. I've given you documents. I'm looking at Frances Nunziata, a woman who told me years ago she would not help our family. And I'm looking at her with a vote on the board. I have asked the chief of police over and over, when were you at 13 Division, and got no answer. I received a letter when I arrived at the police station today telling me there's going to be no answer. I want an answer. When was he there? Excuse me. We documented everything that happened to us. We were faced with a gang led by a school teacher. Nothing happened to them. I can't believe we're talking about gangs. I used to talk about a gang every day. I used to write about it every day. I sent documents to another country about it. I wrote to the United Nations about it. I asked for a rapporteur to be sent to Toronto. But we're talking about gangs. None of you really know anything much about gangs. We were faced with that gang every day. A gang of vicious children led by adults that had weapons. Some were real and some weren't. Where was the former chief of police then? Letters went to the board. Letters went to the chief at the time. They went to a whole group of people. No one answered. I've tried to give you some of the documentation. There are boxes of documentation. Everything was documented on a daily basis of what was transpiring. And while the police were refusing us service, there is a whole file from a public health nurse requesting police service. And every time she requested police service, she got the answer, no. She should tell us to call the Premier's office, which we did time and again with no outcome. Some of the people that were supposedly on our side to help us, which should have been the police chief, the deputy chiefs, and everyone else, no one ever came near us for help. So we had to hire bodyguards, security guards, detectives, lawyers, until we were almost bankrupt. We lived like paupers. And no one ever said, what can we do to help you? But everyone's telling us about gangs now. You have no idea what it's like to be faced on a daily basis with a gang. Have someone point a knife at you. Have people yell they're going to kill your child and call her a heathen and yell that today's the day they decided to kill her. Today's the day they decided to rape her. And not one of you has asked me who I'm talking about. When I told Deputy Chief Barbara McLean that one of the officers involved in this is now a chaplain, she told me that she was going to contact me within a few weeks. I've never heard back from her. I've never heard from the chief. The chief that we prayed for. We want a black chief who will be more sympathetic. At the end of my few minutes, I'm going to ask that the chief of police be removed from his job as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
That's enough with him already.
Councillor, second floor.
We had Tavis. We disbanded Tavis, and we've criticized the good police. Do you think I appreciated the police coming to my house, sneaking around to tell me that they want me to know they're not all involved? No, it didn't help me. Oh, they wanted me to know they were sorry. Just like you said, sorry for us. I don't need anyone to be sorry. I needed protection for my mother, my daughter, myself, and my unborn baby. I used to have to grab my daughter's hand and try to run when, oh, I'm sorry, Francis, am I keeping you awake? Am I keeping you awake with your yawning? This is out of hand, Chairman Pringle. I have received no assistance since the first day I brought this to your attention. And by the way, I would like to say grateful thanks to you because you're the only person who ever responded in any way. Nobody ever answered our letters, and we have a file made by a public health nurse where she consistently contacts the police board, begging for help for our family. The only person who has ever asked me any questions while I've been speaking is Ken Jeffers, who asked some questions, who spoke to me once in the hall. No one else except Miss Upala today came up to say anything to me. No one has ever said a word. Mrs. Campbell showed devotion to her job. Miss Williams showed devotion to her job. But most everyone else would like to pretend that what I'm saying, they can't hear it, they can't see it, and they don't know about it. Our mayor, I've asked the mayor for help, never got to see him, never got to see the chief. Was told by one of the staff members the reason I can't see the chief, get ready, is because I can't go in his office in case I take something. What? In case I take something from the chief's office? Is this a joke of some sort on our family? I want to know when our property is going to be returned to us. I want to know when our money is going to be returned to us. I want to know when we're going to get an apology. I want to know when my mother is, my daughter is going to get the keys to the city. The little girl who was the punching bag for the gang. The little girl who was punched in the face, kicked in the back, spit on, had garbage thrown all over her, with police standing over top of her saying, "What have you done so that people spit on you and hit you?" Oh. Asking her why she was getting beaten up. She was a baby in a carriage. And now, to this day, the last time she was in the police station, 2016, and that report Bradfield gave all of you, he lied about what happened. I've never been to the police station to talk about rudeness. I couldn't care less who's rude. I'm rude. Who cares? I care if you do your duty. Do you do your duty? That's all I care about. Do you treat everyone equally? Do you treat everyone fairly? Do you do your duty? Who cares if you're rude? I feel distressed that comments have been written in 2 reports that I have never made. My mother fell off a roof. This nonsense about I live next door to a policeman who runs a prostitution ring. What is this nonsensical talk about? I've never made any of these comments. I have given documents that my mother was sick and on dialysis, chased out of her own house because the ambulances couldn't get in and out. I want to know why there has not been an independent review of what I've said. It's certainly well documented enough. Some of the people involved are still alive. I've given affidavits to what happened. I don't know. I've never seen a case with more documentation and photographs. And when I try to show the documents and the photographs, I'm told that I wrote all the documents. And the ones I didn't write, my mother must have forged. My mother and I forged nothing. We bought the property we live in, and now someone else owns a piece of it and has our money in their bank account. My daughter was punched in the face so many times that the doctor wrote a certificate keeping her home for weeks because she thought she was going to be killed. I want this board to give me an independent review, never mind these cops that are scared to point their finger at anyone. I want the real people. I want a judge who will look at the documents and the photographs and come up with an answer to what happened. As the mayor, you should be concerned about what happened to our family. With this truth and reconciliation story, where's the truth and reconciliation? And as for my chief of police, that's enough with you already, Chief Saunders. I've reached the top of my limits. You've never spoken one word to me since I've been begging you for your attention. So I'm going to ask, I'm not going to ask you to resign, but as soon as your time's up, out you go. That's what I'd like to see.
Brenda, thank you very much.
I feel really badly
Ms.
that
Ross?
you didn't take more of an interest. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll ask you to just step aside for a minute. There's one more deputation, and
Of
then
course.
we'll get into colleagues
Of
and
course.
questions. The next deputation is Derek Moran. And Derek, unlike Brenda, you are still stuck with 5 minutes only, and I'll give you a 1 minute warning.
So one thing I want to make sure I get into this, because I've actually bumped into Brenda out there somewhere on the street, and we sat down. I've just kind of sat there and listened to her tell me about this just absolute horror show of a story, and it's like, ay, 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 you know what I mean? Like, you think you got a bad life until you hear what she's told me that she's been through. And if you go on this website, duhame.org, it's a law-related site. It has law-isms, has this one great quote. It reminds me of what Brenda's been going through. The law is like a cobweb. It's made for flies and smaller kind of insects, so to speak, but lets the big bumblebees break through. That's from Daniel Drew, quoted in Book White, the book of Daniel Drew, 1910. And it's just like, I hear about the neighbor over and over and over, and it's like the neighbor must have pictures of like the top brass of the Toronto Police, because how come the Toronto Police haven't done anything to rein the neighbor in? You know what I mean? Like, imagine going through your life being taunted by the neighbor, as Brenda has told me about, oh, Brenda, just to let you know, today's the day your daughter's going to be raped. Oh no, today's the day your daughter's going to be gang raped. Over and over and over again, and it's just like, I don't know, I thought we had the police there to call up and say, this is what's happening. Wow, that sounds really bad. We'll send an officer over to talk to the neighbor. But, I mean, I'm a third party. I can only go by what she's saying. But how is nothing being done to the neighbor? Like, I remember coming here at the start of a meeting, Superintendent Baptiste was sitting down, talking with her and saying to Brenda, like, geez, I'm just trying to help, Brenda. It's like, okay, well, why don't we send Superintendent Baptiste over there and pull the neighbor aside and say, listen, like, this stops, this ends now, okay? No more of all that nasty talk that she's being, and all the violence that she's being subjected to from what she's told me. Like, is that too much? I mean, it's a Toronto Police Service, but I don't think the Toronto Police get to choose, pick and choose. I mean, it kind of seems that way. They don't get to pick and choose. I mean, they cash their last paycheck, right? I mean, is it asking too much? I mean, I don't know. Like, either she's completely crazy, or she's right. She's not crazy. She's right, and nothing's being done to help her. Like, which one is it? I don't think she'd expend all this time, all this energy. I mean, she's just about to collapse when she comes down here to speak. Can we send like one officer out there to just, come here, I need to talk to you, neighbor. It's done. This is over. Don't look at her. Don't talk to her. Any more complaints, we're going to make your life hell for you. So other than that, because Brenda, 1 minute?
So you got a minute and 37 seconds, but.
Okay, so like one thing that Brenda mentioned to me was about getting her, I forget the context, but getting her front door kicked in. Okay, so one thing I want to tell her about was R versus Tricker, 1995, Court of Appeal of Ontario, about the doctrine of implied invitation. However, the license to the doctrine of implied invitation ends at the door to the house and may be revoked by directing the person on the property to leave. The law is clear that the occupier of a dwelling gives implied license to any member of the public, including a police officer, on legitimate business to come onto the property. Such implied license can be rebutted by express refusal of it, as in this case the Robsons could no doubt have rebutted the implied license to the police officers by putting up a notice on their front gate, no admittance to police officers, but that was not done in this case. So maybe that's a notice she could put up for the neighbor, you know, don't set foot on my property, or, you know, I'll call the police that hopefully this time around, you know, I'll do something to help her.
Thank you, Derek. Colleagues, questions to Derek? If not, Derek, thank you. And then, Brenda, if you want to come back, colleagues may have some questions of you. I would say, colleagues, that you know, Brenda first brought this up to me when we were doing the consultations mark across the city, and it was the one at City Hall, and I think she brought it up at one of the earlier ones as well. You know, Brenda, listen, I've told you before, you know, I hear you don't want the sympathy, but let me just say, you know, I've taken it very seriously. We have pursued it, but I told you always that we may come to some point where we just couldn't go any further. You've been to the OIPRD, and that's come back. So, you know, I think we're very sympathetic. We wanted to hear your story. We have spent time trying to assist you, but you know, at some point we have to move forward. So, colleagues, I don't know if you've got any questions of Brenda or anything you want to. Ulli, you were first, and then Councillor Hart.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Ross. Going through, I want to first say thank you for raising this to the awareness of the board. Going through any kind of complaints process or review or investigation is extremely difficult. So I want to say thank you for your courage for doing so. I understand that the police board staff have been supporting you, and from speaking to Ryan and Sandy, I hope that you found that helpful. And having read your written deputation, I know there were concerns that the board might not have received some information, so I really wanted to acknowledge and confirm to you that we did receive all the documents that you provided, and we did all read them thoroughly.
Did you get copies of the documents that were given to Kevin Bradfield?
I think everything that you'd submitted, even the ones you submitted today, we received.
Oh, no, I'm asking that the board get everything that was submitted to Kevin Bradfield, and I've also informed the board there is a big file written by the health nurse where she names all the police officers asked for help that were requested to help, and each one of them says no. Nobody agrees they're going to help. They're not going to help. And as smart Alex respond, we should go to the Premier's office, which we did. But as they said, we're not the police. We don't arrest anyone. And you heard what Derek had to say. Nobody got arrested but me. I'm the only person who got arrested. Nobody got chased out of their house but my mother. Nobody got beaten up but us. My mother, sitting in a wheelchair that couldn't walk, got the rocks. She got the cans. She got told she was going to be punched in the face. She got chased out of her house. My daughter's the one who got beaten up so many times I've lost count. I don't remember how many times she got beaten up. She was only a little kid, and sometimes I'd be right beside her, screaming for help, screaming and trying to fight back and trying to hit people. And I wasn't strong enough to do it, so I'd grab her hand and try to run and get in the house before anyone could do anything else to her. And there's something I cannot say in public, but I told to Frank Bergen, who was the assistant to the chief. I told him, I showed a picture of it. And I said, this picture went to the police, and they let this man get away with this. This is my little girl. And nothing happened to any of these people. But other people call the police and talk nonsense, and somebody's life gets ruined over it. And Frances Nunziata, all she had to do was pick up her phone and make one phone call, and she would not do it. But now she's sitting on this board, and not just her.
Brenda,
Mayor Tory wouldn't speak to me.
Brenda, thank you. Now, could we please be quiet? No, thank you. No. Okay, thank you very much. If you'd be kind enough to sit down, we don't. I think.
So, Ms.
Brenda,
Ross, I just want to
you.
respond to your question that we did confirm that we did receive all of the documentation that you had provided.
Now,
Deliberately has not been given to you
okay.
for the following reason. Because the police officers were so hostile towards me, we actually asked Justice Tulloch that he remove all officers from investigation, and his findings haven't been passed, but we didn't want any officers involved. I made a mistake. I shouldn't have gone to any meeting with any officers. I didn't have any witnesses with me, and it was a mistake. So I've been misquoted, etc., etc. But the bottom line is, after all of these injuries to our family and all of these things that have happened, no one, not one policeman, has come forward to say what he knows. A couple of them have come to me in the past, and I've said, please don't come to me. No one's going to believe that you even spoke to me. They're scared to come forward with good reason, Ms. Jupala, because you saw what happened to the ones that recently came forward. You see where they are. They're in the garbage can.
Brenda, thank you. Colleagues, Councillor Hart, did you have anything you wish to? Would you be quiet, please, or we'll have to adjourn the meeting and clear the room. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Is there any other discussion or questions, colleagues? Okay. Brenda, listen. You know, this is the original complaint was November of 2017. A complaint to the OIPRD, and the first aspect of the complaint was the Toronto Police Service Division 13 not taking action that you reported. That's the one we're investigating that the OIPRD has turned back to us. The second one, I gather, they have not responded on. The chief has now filed a report reporting on that. I think, colleagues, Brenda, if you want to sit down, we'll discuss that, or you can stay right there if you wish.
If I can make clear what I'm asking, okay. I'm asking for an independent review.
So, colleagues,
and I'm asking, I am fully stating in public that I believe that our Chief of Police Saunders, is covering up for everybody because this is a scandal supreme.
Brenda,
a scandal supreme.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We. First of all, not considering an independent review. You've had the benefit of the Office of the Independent Review Committee, which is set up to do that. And so we have not, you know, you've gone through that process. This first part has been turned back to us. The chief has reported on that. Chief Saunders, is there anything you
have any shame.
Is there anything you want to add to your report? If not, colleagues, is there any questions?
Is it okay with you that my daughter got beaten up all those times, that my mother was attacked,
Ms.
that
Ross,
I was attacked? Was that
Brenda,
okay?
Brenda,
You're a disgrace.
Brenda,
You're a damn disgrace.
Brenda, thank you very much. Okay. She's had the chance to do it. Thank you. She's already had the chance to do it. Thank you very much. Please sit down. Please sit down. Thank you. So, colleagues, you have the report in front of you, and that the.
I'm going to tell you I do not know how the chief or anyone else could conclude that no action would be required, except that I.
Brenda, let me assure you that I've taken an interest in this, as you've said. I have pursued this as far as I think we possibly can. You can take it back to the OIPRD, but we've asked the chief for a fulsome report. All board members have been engaged and are very sympathetic to your issue. And I think that, unfortunately, it's got to the stage where I said it may get to at some point where we've got to report back. We've got recommendations in front of us, and the board's got to consider that. So whether you want to stand there.
Here thinks this is strange that the chief says no action required.
We're just about to ask that. Colleagues, any other questions of the report? Mayor Tory, is there anything that you wanted to add?
I only wanted to say to Ms. Ross,
Okay, I think, colleagues, we'll just adjourn the meeting for a minute and take a 5-minute break. So if we could just get up and leave. Thank you.
It's an abuse to disability issues here. Closing down the second floor washroom, it was not the right thing to do. That's not good in communities. Open up the second floor washer. It's for everybody for the last 10 years. Now I'm told that only staff can use the washroom. Mr. Saunders, I'm speaking to you. Why you close the second floor washroom to the public? For the last 10 years has been the norm, because I come to this board for the last 10 years and know that I'm going to be coming again and again and again. Open up the second floor washroom. You're doing disservice to people with disabilities. What is your human rights?
What? There were officers that were in on us. We're trying to.
That's a disservice.
I know whatever's there. Thank God everything is on the white side.
That guy over there doesn't know me. I've been here for 10 years. This old guy, 10 years. I've been coming to this place for 10 years, and I'm going to come back again. I guess I'm going to have to file a complaint with the human rights. I'm going to go to the washroom, maybe I'm going to get arrested. Secretary 24 is going to be recording it. I gotta go pee-pee. I'm holding it.
And that's the issue with diversity. And they're not trained well enough to understand people's different diverse styles of communication, behavior.
I wonder if I go to 51 division, I do the same to the guy who's looking at me. I go tell him, you cannot use the washer. How would you feel? Oh, come on, you know that.
So that people can be as limited as possible. And they can marginalize. So if I'm gay, and they don't know I'm like because I'm gay, I get written up and arrested. So if I try to work with a system that doesn't want to work with me, basically I'm submitting I'm being a slave or masochistic systems around society. That's basically what it is.
cannot. We have a specific set of procedures that hear people and take counsel, but the meeting cannot be disrupted. So if it happens again, I will do that. We have heard the deputations, colleagues. We have heard the chief's report. If there are no more questions, there is a motion on the screen that the board determined that it satisfied the Toronto Police Service responded to investigated and documented reports and incidents reported by the complainant, and concur with the decision of the chief that the service delivered by the Toronto Police Service was adequate and appropriate, and that no further action is required with respect to this complaint. Does anybody wish to speak to it? If not, is there a proposer? Councillor Hart, seconder. Councillor Nunziata. All in favor? Any contrary? Carried. Thank you very much. Let's go through. I haven't yet gone through, because of the depositions, the agenda items. So we have done number 5. Item number 6 is motion to approve the review of the Chief's access to historical data report. That's from the Regulated Interactions Review Panel. Motion to approve. Mayor Tory, seconded Marie Molnar, thank you. All in favor? Any contrary? Carried. The next is a motion to receive the access to historical data report for the first quarter 2018. Motion to receive. Councillor Hart, seconded Ms. Molnar. All in favor? Any contrary? Carried. Thank you. Item number 7, there are deputations, so it's held. Item number 8 is the special constable appointments, July 2018. Motion to approve. Mayor Tory, Councillor Hart, all in favor? Any contrary? Thank you. Carried unanimously. Item number 9 is motion to approve the award of supply and delivery for genuine Ford automotive repair parts. Motion to approve. Ms. Molnar, Councillor Hart, all in favor? Any contrary? Carried. Item number 10 is the inquest into the death of Mark Tomic, the verdict and recommendations of the jury. Motion to receive. Councillor Hart, seconded Ms. Molnar, all in favor? Any contrary? Carried. Item number 11 is City Council Toronto Seniors version 2.0. Motion to approve. Ms. Santa Casera, seconded Mayor Tory, all in favor? Any contrary? Item number 12 is held for deputation. Item number 13, the same thing. Item number 14, 2017 Annual Report, University of Toronto Special Constables. Motion to receive. Mayor Tory, seconded Ms. Molnar, all in favor? Any contrary? Carried. And item number 15 is hold for deputation. So that takes us now to item number 7, which is deputations, and the deputants are Miguel. Miguel, 5 minutes. You get a 1-minute warning.
Okay. Budget. So my question is, what are we going to do to help Toronto community housing? I heard that $12 million will get to programs that are somehow producing a positive output to reduce people involved in criminal activities, etc., etc. In 2016, we had I was surprised and honored to have Mayor Tory to come to our 220 Oak Street, and it was nice for him to hear from our tenants. The Toronto Star made an amazing report on 220 Oak Street and the work that COTA is doing for people with mental illness and addictions. COTA recently has reduced their hours to the community. They used to be from 10 to 7 p.m. And they used to be open on Saturdays. Now it's closed. thanks to the Balfour government and the cuts to the cap and trade, some of the retrofits for social housing approved or were going to be approved for 220 Oak Street I guess they're gonna have to be canceled due to the inability to secure funding. I want to give you I want to read to you the minutes of the 220 Oak Street community meeting, and these are the capital funding progress requests that we made to the corporations. Do you know that we have very derelict and old window frames? Those window frames allow the penetration of cold air or the exit of warm air through the windows because they are cracked, they're old. But unfortunately, thank you to Mr. Duckford, those windows will never be replaced, and therefore we're going to be continuing misspending taxpayers' money. So what I talked to Kevin very briefly, and I say to Kevin, listen, if you're going to dedicate $12 million, I need to sit down with Mrs. Katie Milson. Katie Milson is the current CEO. She directed one of her officers of the staff to come to 220 Oak Street to do an observation on the facilities. The facilities does not provide the structure for carry programs that helps the community. So we need an investment of money. So perhaps it's good that this $12 million can help us to address some of the issues that I just mentioned to you, the reduction of hours of services for Kota residents. And we benefit tremendously from Kota. And I want you to understand that we have an amazing art program that is producing amazing creativity work. And then we have to continue encouraging that. But due to the cuts that we are being forced to understand that this is because 8 cents a liter on the gas is really a joke, right? But it seems that for us, the poor, we don't have that facility, but to ask the government at the time to help us with these infrastructure issues. Now, again, I'm going to direct my comments to Mr. Saunders. Mr. Saunders, I came here in a good spirit to give my deputation about Kota, to help my residents. But to find out that after 10 years, you close down the second floor washroom, I wonder if this is a subject related to budget. Because you're not doing a service, you're doing a disservice to people with disabilities. Imagine that if someone has to go, like I had diabetes and I had to go to pee 3 times. And now I had to excuse myself, or I'm holding the pee. Right now, I'm holding it. And it's not fair, it's not fun. And I don't want to get arrested by going into in the alley. So I'm going to go there, and I'm going to ask the cameras to follow me. If you arrest me for going to use the washroom, you will have a nice complaint. Thank you so much.
You wouldn't be aware. First of all, the fact that the money was withdrawn, that's a fact for some of the housing retrofits, but it doesn't mean, as you stated, the repairs won't take place. We're trying to find other ways in which we can fund it, and I should say, even the people at the government, while they've said that the funding source through the cap and trade, or whatever it's called, the Go Green Fund, has been abolished, that they will help to look and see if there are other places we can get the money back from some other source. So I just want you to know that in the context of your fellow residents, that we're going to still try to make the repairs because, as you pointed out, they make sense. And I've taken a note. I was unaware of the Kota hours, but I'm certainly aware of the Kota program and the value that's represented at Oak Street, so I've taken a note of it, and we'll go back and ask. But on the retrofits, they may still happen, even though that money, you're right, is not coming to us anymore. Half of it roughly has been canceled.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for that explanation.
Okay.
I really appreciate it, and we'll take it back to the residents.
Okay, thanks, Miguel. The colleagues, we need to appoint 2 members of the board to the Capital and the Budget Operating Committee, the Budget Committee. It was Shelley Carroll last year with Murray Mulliner. Do we have any suggestions and volunteers? Anybody? Marie, are you interested in doing it again? I mean, I think it was very successful last year. We did our first public consultation, and
I agreed that it was a good, Shelley and I have been both interested in the process and the transparency. I think it went very well. And I'm not confident that I can commit to those dates, unfortunately, but I'm happy to help out in any other way.
okay. Councillor Hart?
As I said on an earlier item we talked about today, I'll commit to anything you want, recognizing that I've got a sunset date potentially of November 30th. But I'll commit to helping. I've done lots of budgets.
Okay. Councillor Nunziata, are you? Okay. Okay, I guess, Jim, it's you and me. That's okay. So, colleagues, are you... colleagues, you comfortable with all of that? That Jim and I are the two people that put our names forward? If that's the case, may I have a motion to accept the deputation and approve item number 7 with the appointment of Councillor Hart and myself? So Mayor Tory, Mr. Jeffers, all in favor? Any contrary? Thank you. That takes us to item number 12, where there's a deputation again, and that deputation is Derek Moran.
For the record, I just want to say that when I first got here, I used the washroom twice on the second floor. Nobody stopped me. It's not because I'm white, is it?
Yeah, you have 4 minutes and 42 seconds.
Okay. So you're not on Twitter, I don't think, still, right, Chair Pringle? But you know who is? Is someone? I got a new follower on July 15th. Some guy named Michael Tobolo. I think he's the new Solicitor General in Ontario. Don't pay attention to this. This is just a notice of appearance from Fred Fisher. But, okay, so Public Works and Infrastructure Committee item, next steps on traffic safety measures. You know, I sometimes speak at Public Works and Infrastructure Committee. Here's a picture of me and picture of Councillor Mammoliti. Councillor Mammoliti is actually not afraid of asking me questions when I go down there, isn't I? I think that's great. So I forget if what the issue was, but Councillor Mammoliti asks me, have you ever tried to actually challenge some of the things that we do down here? Because I tend to agree with you in some cases that you raise, and sometimes the courts have to rule on the things that we do down here. You ever thought that maybe you should challenge some of the things that we do down here? Have you ever thought about just appealing to the courts and arguing your points in front of the courts on a few things that we decide to do down here to prove your point? So in this report, it says, Council adopted a report that included a recommendation that the Toronto Police Service provide necessary resources to adequately enforce the Highway Traffic Act in Toronto's neighborhoods, and City Council requests the Police Services Board to submit a report to the City on the implementation of Council's request. Now, keep in mind, not just City of Toronto Council, all municipal councils have been, in regards to them, have been said by the Supreme Court of Canada in 2000, Nanaimo versus Rascal Trucking Limited. The courts may review those jurisdictional questions on a standard of correctness. Neither experience nor proficiency in municipal law and municipal planning, while desirable, is required to be elected a councillor. Good to know. Given the relatively broad range of issues that a municipality must address, it is unlikely that most councillors will develop such special expertise even over an extended time. That's very reassuring. There's a text called the Annotated Ontario Highway Traffic Act text. There's a case in there, a couple cases in there that aren't on Canley. So this is Field versus Supertest Petroleum Corporation 1943, Jenner versus Pellin 1953 from Nova Scotia, Manitoba, respectively. Not many people know this, but a license is not a certificate of the fitness to drive or skill of the holder. And not having a license is not a material fact upon which a plaintiff may rely in a negligence action. A pleading to that effect will be struck out. This is Ontario Hospital Services Commission et al. Versus Borowski, 1973, Superior Court of Justice. Leaving aside for the moment impairment from the consumption of alcohol, I advert to the matter of incompetence and inexperience. The failure to possess a lawfully issued operator's permit would not of itself constitute incompetence and inexperience, although it could be one of the indices in certain circumstances by which either might be measured. And R versus Blake, Superior Court of Justice, 2003. As is set out in the section, the correct name and address of the person shall be deemed to be reasonable identification. It is not an offense to refuse to produce insurance and ownership papers on demand pursuant to Section 33.3 of the Highway Traffic Act. Now, I just want to point out, it says there specifically that when a police officer says you have to give them identification, they want the correct name and address of the person shall be deemed to be reasonable identification. As I don't know if you remember, Chair Pringle, last month I mentioned I sent the person, the birth certificate I have, back to the Registrar General's office. So if I ever get asked by Toronto police officers, just so everyone knows here, you're going to have to go to Thunder Bay and ask the Registrar General's office to ask for that information regarding the person. And let's not forget the enacting clause required of it by Section 6 of the Legislation Act is lacking from the Toronto Highway Traffic Act, which makes it invalid and of no force or effect to begin with. And just to point out, take notice that there is actually no definition for what a person is in the Highway Traffic Act. And actually, you'd think there'd be a definition for what traffic is in the Highway Traffic Act, but there's not also. Actually, it really should be called the Highway Commerce Act.
Thank you, Derek. Any questions of Derek?
No commerce and or contract expected and or implied.
Thank you, Derek. Any, so no questions, any, if not, a motion to approve the item number 12, the Public Works Infrastructure Committee. Councillor Hart, seconded. Ms. Molnar, all in favor? Any contrary? Carried. Item number 13 is Chris Langenfeld on the special fund.
Thank you. I'd just like to point out that obviously this microphone isn't as good as the other ones, and I got a question why you decided to replace it. I know you have total control over it, and it doesn't get turned on at the beginning of deputations with the recordings.
I don't have control over that one. I tried to hang up on someone earlier, and it didn't work. So
well, I've seen you hang up on them in the past, so I guess maybe they rewired it.
That's when that microphone was like all the others. I'm not quite sure why it's changed, but I'll find out, Chris.
Wow. It obviously doesn't work as well. You have a choice of either shouting into it or not being heard on the video recordings. And with response to Miguel's issue with the washrooms, apparently he was able to get there up here. I missed the beginning of his deputation because I had to walk halfway across the building. I'm surprised we're not being sent to the Tim Hortons on the corner. I'm sure that's coming. In the meantime here, regarding this audit, I noticed in the 4th paragraph that Pricewaterhouse mentions, because the above-mentioned procedures do not constitute an audit of the account balances or transactional activity within the TPSB special fund as are at the year-end December 31, 17. We express no opinion on these account balances as at 17 or the transactional activity for the year ended 17. Had we performed additional procedures or had we performed an audit of the account balances and transactional activity of the TPSB special fund, other matters might have come to our attention that would have been reported to you. And as a former accountant myself, I certainly know that this is auditor speak for, we don't know if there's fraud or anything else going on in these balances. We didn't look, we were told not to. That was the agreement of our contract. And so I'd like to suggest that perhaps you should have this account audited so that we do in fact have a third-party opinion on it. Part of their findings in Appendix 2 of that item, the exceptions to the policy related to the funding for 2017 Pearls in Policing Conference during June 2017. You'll remember I spoke to this before I left last spring, or a year ago last spring, and I noticed that I'm not sure of the date of this Pearls conference, but it was around that time that this ridiculous policy of violating people's rights to search them coming into the building came into play. So I wonder if this is maybe something that some foreign police department has, and in these secret pearls policing meetings of police officers from around the world if this wasn't one of the schemes that they cooked up to violate people's rights. And of course now the service has appealed the decision of Justice Copeland, the ruling the search is unconstitutional, and perhaps we'll have to go a little further with this. Obviously the Board of Appeals will, or the Court of Appeal will hopefully rule a little more strongly, and maybe we'll have to get them to defend our bathroom rights. So the other matter with this Pearls was that there was going to be a report from the chief as to what exactly happened at this meeting, and that was part of the resolution, that in exchange for the $200,000 to throw a party for foreign police officers, you were at least going to give the public a report of what happened in this secret meeting where no reporters and no government or private oversight is permitted, where only members of policing are allowed. And so I'd, actually it's a minute 16 regardless of what you're signaling. I know you like to play short and loose with the timings. I've had that on other recordings in the past.
People aren't always looking, so I want to make sure you see that, but I do keep it to the exact time, Chris. Thank you.
Well, perhaps we need to have a public timer here, because I've gotten signaled at the 4-minute mark that my time was up on the past recordings. So perhaps that was a mistake. I've watched the video and seen it happen at 4 minutes. Maybe it was just an oversight on the timer. Mistakes happen, obviously, we're all human. So I would hope, though, that we would get some kind of report of what was the benefit. Now, I know this Pearls conference, they certainly spent far less than the $200,000 that was approved. It was comparatively tens of thousands. I don't recall the number at this point. So I don't know why that was. It was just so many people didn't accept the invitation, or what the reason was. But I still think we do need to have some kind of public disclosure of maybe not the details. And I know, Mr. Pringle, you felt that because banking likes to have secret meetings and not have the public there, that's the way of doing banking business, that I'm assuming you seem to think that's the way to do police board and government oversight. I see my time's up, so
I gave you an extra 10 seconds to allow for the interruption, Chris, and thank you. I guess we're going to, you mentioned that you're running, so I guess we're going to see a lot more of you, but thank you for your deputation. Any colleagues, any questions for Chris? Ryan, will you check back in our minutes about the pros and policing, and if we did not get a report, we'll do so. Chief Saunders?
Yeah, I can comment on that. Yes, we did say that we would report back, and this is an oversight. That's certainly something we can do, and we will do.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Colleagues, any further questions? If not, a motion to receive the report on the board special funds. Ms. Muller, seconder. Councillor Hart, all in favor? Any contrary? Thank you, carried. And that gives us number 15, which is community housing and a deputation. I probably don't even need to, Rosemary Frey, thanks. Thank you. So 5 minutes, Rosemary, I'll give you 1 minute.
Okay, so this item is the 2017 annual report for the TCHC Special Constables. It's right here, and the report says on the second page, quote, in 2017, the Special Constable program for TCHC was extremely successful, with special constables completing 524 special criminal investigations for the TPS, of which 49.4% were related to property offenses such as mischief, in brackets 176, and theft, 83. Well, if that's the definition of very successful, I would posit that that's a very unscientific definition of success. The definition of success, in fact, should be ensuring that tenants are safe, and because the cops and the special constables are helping them. You may have seen this article that was in the Globe and Mail on Saturday. If you haven't read it, I would definitely recommend you run, don't walk, but run to read it. It's by John Lawrence. And I know he's been following this for a long time. It's called, the title is The Challenges Facing Seniors in Community Housing. TCHC. And it describes the violence, extortion, and thuggery happening to seniors in TCHC buildings. And it's happening right under policemen's and special constables' noses. The author, John Lawrence, got first-hand accounts from tenants. I've also spoken to the tenants. The accounts absolutely corroborate what is well known to many in this city and elsewhere. There's freedom and justice for some, not for these residents. One of the residents, Connie Harrison, is terrorized by a drug dealer, who bangs on people's doors at night demanding cash. Ms. Harrison once gave him $80. I was terrified he would harm me, she told Mr. Lawrence, the author. And Ms. Harrison, by the way, has tried to get out of TCA, out of that building, and she's been stonewalled. It's a travesty, but she's been trying for a long time. I spoke to Connie. She said, quote, the special constables get angry if you contact them for help. Quote, a lot of tenants don't call the police because the police don't take care of us. And quote, are the cops protecting them? That is, the miscreants. Are they protecting them to the detriment of the tenants? This is pretty disturbing. And this Globe article is just one example of the poor success of the TCHC Special Constables programs. They're not doing their jobs. They're not giving us value for money. I mean, this report, this 2017 annual report, tallies the number of investigations. What it doesn't do is where am I? Where are the benchmarks? Where are the benchmarks of reduction of harm to tenants, reduction of threats and violence and extortion to tenants? Not just saying you have investigations doesn't mean anything without the metrics. It's a farce. I've got a master's in science. Many of you understand statistics and data and how investigations are done. This is a very, I would give this, it's very poor. And there, what happened to by the way, what happened to the monthly reports of data? I mean, a lot of that was a whitewash. It didn't talk about important metrics, even like the huge percentages of strip searches, for example, but it was something. And it was brought in with great fanfare, and it disappeared without a trace, without a whimper. So just in summary, this 2017 report doesn't meet best practices or best standards. Where's the documentation of the true protection of tenants with these? With this higher number of special constables? Where's the account of value for money, or is money no object when it comes to padding the numbers and weaponry of cops and of special constables? Why aren't you making sure the special constables are protecting the most vulnerable, rather than maybe just and why aren't the police doing that? Are all the police here just making sure that to intimidate deputants and making sure we can't go to the washroom on this floor? Thank you.
Thank you, Rosemary. Colleagues, questions for Rosemary? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, if not, then a motion to receive the 2017 annual report, Toronto Community Housing Corporation, Special Constables. Councillor Hart, seconded. Ms. Mulliner, all in favor? Any contrary? Carried. Is there any other business? Okay, motion to adjourn. Councillor Hart, Ms. Sandra Casero, all in favor? Any contrary? Carried. Thank you.